to ascend to learning and to see the good, but to be willing to descend again to those prisoners and to share their troubles and their honors, whether they are worth having or not. And this they must do, even with the prospect of death. They shall give of their help to one another, wherever each class is able to help the community.
So that's the allegory of the cave, is the way it's usually referred, from Book 7 of Plato's Republic. And read all the different analyses. Not everybody agrees on everything, of course. You can look at the Wikipedia, the discussion about it, and so on. I've heard some folks actually refer to the TV as an example. You know, all the kids growing up watching the TV and not seeing the real world instead. But what Plato's actually, I mean, most would agree, talking about is being in the real world. These are shadows as far as Plato's philosophy is concerned, because the real things are the ideas. And the ideas are the ones that are lit by the sun, which for Plato is the idea of the good. So even the physical sun that we have as part of the allegory, because as far as Plato's concerned, that's part of the physical world, which it's misleading. Everything is constantly in flux. Remember, the Greeks had an issue with the problem of change. You know, how do you have the world, which is one thing, and yet it's changing constantly? Well, Plato's answer is that the ideas are unchanging. Those are the real. And, you know, the physical world is made up of matter which is corrupt, and the constant change that's going on is corruption. So the idea of the body is a prison house of the soul. You know, this is a miserable place for our souls to find themselves. You know, as in these physical bodies where you have pains and hungers and desires and all these things that are different than, you know, the clear ideas that Plato is basically inventing at the time. That, you know, I would argue that he's actually inventing a model based on the idea that the ideas are not just how things appear to us, which is the way most Greeks were talking at the time, but actually instead he kind of transforms the idea of ideas into something that exists permanently in kind of, you know, some abstract arrangement that structures the universe, right? So when we're looking at things, we in a Platonic sense, we talk about the things participating in whatever idea we categorize them by. So when you see a chair, sorry, I know in philosophy class you talk about tables and chairs, anything that's close, you know, pens, Tide detergent. No, you usually don't talk about Tide. But in any case, you know, the chair, you know, I recognize these chairs, as far as Plato seems to be thinking, not because I recognize some physical object and it's a chair. No, instead there's a physical object that temporarily appears to me to be a chair based on my understanding of what chairs are. Yes?
So was the whole thing that like change is corruption and kind of everything just gets worse over time? Like the idea itself just like degrades?
You know, it's interesting. We might think, you know, about things getting worse or better. I don't remember Plato talking about things being worse or better. Instead, you know, it's like, well, matter is corrupt all the time. It's not like it could be better. In fact, one of the things that's interesting is he's critical of writing, even though he's obviously the one that's bequeathing us all these dialogues and everything that he's written, right? So he's using this new media, prose, basically, in order to pass these dialogues on. And yet, at the same time, he's critical of writing because what's better is memorization. And if you have writing, you're going to be ruined, because you won't have to remember this stuff. You could just have your notes and go back and check your notes. And instead of forcing yourself to remember everything, you could just, cheat, basically, which is corrupting for you, actually, to think of it that way. Did you have a question?
Yeah. I was just, so is it like, his understanding of it is like, so like, for instance, let's say the teachings of the Bible, like that will like live on, or just anything that's an idea, versus like everything else is kind of decaying, like our bodies and like this world decays, but ideas live on because they just pass through generations and get passed on through people. Is that what he's trying to?
Well, our soul is the key element here.
Okay.
Because for Plato, our souls know the ideas. We're already one with the ideas. And so you don't get the sense that for Plato, we have to learn what things are. Mm-hmm. We're reminded what things are. Mm-hmm. So as we have experiences in this corrupt body, mm-hmm. Oh, I know what that is. Mm-hmm. I know what that is. Oh, I know what that is. Mm-hmm. In the Meno, where he uses the slave boy to solve the Pythagorean theorem, his argument is, see, he knew it all. Mm-hmm. I asked him the question, but he knew the right answer. Mm-hmm. So in some sense, everything that is to be known is already known by a soul prior to being born in this body mm-hmm. that corrupts us and screws up our knowledge mm-hmm. of the ideal world, right? Mm-hmm. But we remember it. We have inklings of what's going on, and we're trying to get back to it. And it's kind of interesting. You would think, well, with this view, really suicide would be tempting. But he has an answer to that. Well, the good has put you into this body for a reason. And it's like how would the farmer feel if the cow decided to heck with it and committed suicide? The farmer needs the cow. It would, really be upsetting to the farmer. So if you think, well, here's the good that has you in this position, so there's obviously something important for you to do. So we might want to go back to the ideal world, but we have a chore to take care of, whatever that is. We don't know what it is. So that's interesting. I mean, this whole philosophy actually sounds very confusing. I mean, when we compare it to, more contemporary models of what knowledge is and so on, we're going to have much better ones. Even his student Aristotle is going to give us a different model that's, way more practical. But if you think this is the first that we know of where there's a theory to try to explain all this stuff, in a sense, I think of it as he's inventing a vocabulary. He's changing the vocabulary by saying that these ideas are somehow permanent, fixed, structuring the universe, etc. So when you look at the allegory of the cave, the individual that's sitting there, all of them are sitting there, they're in the real world, what we call the real world, and the shadows are the material things that we think of as the real objects and so on. And we're all excited about the real relationships that people have in this world, how they're all praising one another for what they can do, recognizing the shadows and so on. But it's really the philosopher, the Platonic philosopher that is released, basically comes to realize that if you use reason, you can think up what is the actual nature of the pious. Remember in the Euthyphro, what is the real pious? They don't actually find it, but they have this sense that there's something that is real piety, and that's why we see something and we think, oh, that's pious, and that is pious. That isn't, right? Why? Because we have this idea of the real pious that we're trying to grasp. And the general view is that you won't actually completely re-know it again until your body has died and you've been released, from this prison house, and your soul is once again one with the ideas. So if you think they're suggesting that our soul is as abstract as the ideas, which, if we go to the first, we did talk a little bit about the Euthyphro. You could always do a lot more. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity to read more. The trial. I've got this reference to Aristophanes, because at one point Socrates in the Apology says, who am I arguing against? Who's really behind these charges? He says it's really the people in the court that are trying me now, but everyone has this opinion of me from when they were children, and everyone talked about Socrates being, a crazy old man that, people shouldn't hang around and so on. And he mentions Aristophanes, the clouds, in his defense, because Aristophanes has a scene in the clouds where Socrates is being carried around on a pallet in the play, and he's, talking about, I'm flying, he's basically way out of it and so on. And it's a comedy, so everybody's laughing at this character of Socrates. So Socrates has to defend himself against an old view of who Socrates is, even though it's not true. But you have those folks in that. But the next logical sequence dialogue is the Crito. And Crito is a friend. I think it's also interesting that Crito is the root word for critical thinking or critical reasoning. Crito, right? And in the Crito, Socrates has been arrested. He's in his cell, and Crito comes to him early in the morning, so it's a surprise visit. But what Crito has done is kind of the tradition. When someone's been jailed and sentenced to death, they're waiting for, there's a requirement for the ship to sail to a sacred island, find out from the goddess whether or not the condemnation of the prisoner is agreed to by the goddess, and then come back. So there's a delay before they actually execute the prisoner. So at this point, Crito and his friends have bribed the guards. They've got everything all set up, and basically they've arrived this early in the morning to tell Socrates, let's go, let's get out of here. Let's go get some Chinese food. Sorry, that's Steve Martin. But there are a lot of things absolutely wrong with that sketch, by the way. They don't have Chinese food at the time, for one thing. But in any case, everything's all set. Let's go. We'll escape from Athens. Well, there's some legal things. Strictly speaking, you're not supposed to do that. The other thing is, if the city kills Socrates as a punishment, they have a legal requirement to support his family, so they will be taken care of after Socrates is killed. If he flees, of course, the city has no obligation to his family, so his family will be left basically bereft. Why he doesn't consider taking them with him, I don't know. But Crito is all excited. Now we're going to go to other towns, and everybody's looking forward to talking with you, and so on. And Socrates says, no. This is what my mother, Athens, has required of me, It would be wrong of me, even if I disagree with the judgment, to break the law and run away. Which is kind of interesting. Even if you disagree with the judge, or the way that government's arranged and we kind of collectively agree to go along with the government decides, your obligation is to do what the judge decides for you, even if you